Have you ever wondered what it takes to be a champion? Have you truly thought about the sacrifice, the patience, and the leadership that is required? Well, today we're talking to a man that knows what that's like. And after leading his team to their first national title in program history last year, he's looking to keep that momentum rolling right into the 2025 season. It is an absolute honor to welcome to the show the head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers and 2024 national champion, Tony Vitello, accompanied by longtime friend of the show and current MLB agent Joey Guzman from Empowerment Sports Group. Tony, we'll start with you, man. What's going on? How you doing?
Not much. I'm doing better now after that intro. You got me excited about the season, but adding a little bit of pressure there too. Last year will be tough to replicate, but it's nice having a fresh start. There's no better day in baseball than opening day, and we're not too far away.
Yes, sir. So you guys had a monumental season last year. You guys have been on a roll. You just mentioned a little bit about that pressure. Momentum is obviously at your back. Is there a pressure on you guys to follow it up? How do you keep the momentum rolling and everybody like hungry for success moving forward?
Yeah, one of the things that makes our league so great, and really I think it's the originating thing of what makes it great, is it's just different in the Southeast. Not saying it's better or worse, but it's different. It means so much to these people. So when you have conversations on the street, yeah, there is kind of that pressure, expectation to do something special this year. But if you take a step back, you see all these new faces, a little bit of a different and new vibe with this particular group that's trying to write their own story. And then the bigger story, if you take another step back, is we're in a new conference. It's the SEC. It's arguably the best conference in college baseball, but it has two new members in Oklahoma and Texas. And really, the scheduling, the conference tournament, everything has a little bit different spin on it this year. And it'll be exciting, I think, for every program, all 16 teams now, to navigate through those 10 weekends. And again, Hoover, and hopefully we get as many teams as possible into the postseason.
Love it. Love it. Big time. Joey, man, longtime friend of the show. It's awesome to have you back here. Man, I'd love to hear how you guys kind of got acclimated in your friendship, man. And Joey, how has your relationship with Tony kind of changed the perspective of the game today for you, man?
Yeah, so it goes way back. I think it was 2017 when he first was that your first year, Tony?
Yeah, first
2017?
the summer of
The summer.
17.
Yeah, so I was at Vanderbilt. I see a bag sitting there down the third base line watching the Kansas City Royals scout team. I remember like it was yesterday. And I go sit down. I'm watching a couple of the arms there, and I'm just starting out as an agent, as an advisor. And Tony comes my way, and we start talking, and I'll never forget. He's like, "I'm just looking for guys to help us get to Omaha," and he said it with such a serious attitude, and he really meant what he said, and that resonated with me. And he's like, "We're open to any guys that are going to help us get to Omaha." He didn't treat me any differently, being the head coach. He had a lot of success at different programs, and he's just a great guy. He's always communicates. He's always honest. I see him in Jupiter and different tournaments and things. He's always very welcoming, has conversations, and he never lets anything get too big for him. And I wasn't surprised last year when they won the national championship. Just seeing that he was open to even have conversation with me that day. Sometimes that egos get in front of things, and they don't want to really communicate with other people unless they're in their little circle. And I think that's what's led to a lot of success on the recruiting end for Tony. And then obviously they take a big role in player development. I think they're the best program in the country when it comes to developing players. And when you see players that aren't top 3 round talent out of high school and they go to Tennessee, and then 3 years later they're getting their name called in the first or second round, that attributes to all their success and his coaching staff. He loves his coaching staff. He loves his players. And he just operates a lot differently than some of the other programs. And I have a lot of respect for him.
What's going on, everybody? We as baseball players, we as athletes, we all have something in common that we all share with one another. At some point, our careers are going to come to an end. whether we play 15 years in the league or whether we don't make it past high school or college. This is called the Money Playbook. So this teaches financial concepts for student athletes, for professional athletes. It's got a bunch of financial concepts in there that I didn't learn until I was done playing. Go on over to Amazon and check it out. It's called The Money Playbook. It's written by Mark Tepper, who is an NFLPA registered investment advisor. So he has worked with a plethora of professional athletes. Like I said, go to Amazon. We'll leave the link in the bio and the description of this episode. It's a must-have. Check it out. Let me know what you think. So you had mentioned that development piece. 43 players drafted since Tony had taken over in 2017. Man, Tony, for you, what type of advice would you give to young athletes that are one day aspiring to play, maybe for you, play under your tutelage and be able to have the impact that you've been able to have on the game, man? What type of advice would you give to those parents, maybe those players, on what to do?
Well, I don't know. I'm stunned at all those generous comments. I'm just feeling good about myself. I'm thinking maybe I could go play right now.
That
but
fires me up.
but we all know that's not true. I tried that once, and I think this is working out better for me. But for kids in this environment, with all these rule changes in social media, get better every day was Max Scherzer's kind of phrase he kept going back to when we had a conversation. Then he even spoke to our team for a few quick minutes. Of course, he's a loyal Missouri alum, but I was able to be around him there. And I think it's true. It's simple. A lot of the best things, whether it's business or whatever, family, the simplest answer is the true one. It's just hard to execute. And if you can get better every day, that's huge. But to go back to that weekend where we met, Joey, Kirby Connell was at that tournament. And so I was serious because I meant what I was saying. In college sports, there's a lot of ways you can add value to your locker room or your dugout. And then, of course, ultimately on the field. And Kirby is a great example. And the ABCA was such a big deal, and there were so many bodies, and we had a little adversity thrown in there. So I think I failed to really get the message across that I wanted to about Kirby and two other lefties that we had, Chris Stamos and Xander Sechrist. All had three very different paths to get on our campus. One, a last-minute portal guy. Kirby, he had options, but they weren't great. The timing was just phenomenal there. And then Xander Sechrist was one of our first blue-collar recruits. So all three kind of different backgrounds, and then three very different roles they took on for us. But they added so much value as teammates. Off the field, got heavily involved in the community, were beloved. They got the loudest ovations out of anybody on our team, even though they maybe weren't that big name you saw on draft day or that ESPN highlighted. And again, I think to have a full team of Blake Burks would be great. And I would just get a rocking chair and sit in the dugout, as would probably the other coaches. But you have to form a team at any level, but in particular in college. If you've got a strong resume, there's a place for you. And not everybody can be Tom Cruise or the main guy on the movie poster. But I think last year we had a lot of guys that were willing to do just whatever was asked of them. And so I would circle back a long-winded answer to your question. Do not pigeonhole yourself as a young athlete out there. That you have to be this, or you have to do that, or you have to hit this velocity, or you have to be able to have this amount of home runs or run this speed. Because I love Kirby to death. He was at my house last night for dinner. He's coaching with us now. We used him more than anybody you can imagine. He could even call abuse a little bit with coming out of the bullpen so much. But he wasn't any of those things in high school. He was just a great kid, a great teammate, and a great competitor. And the rest of the stuff, the analytics, they weren't there at all. And so, again, I wouldn't pigeonhole yourself. I would get better every day, and the right thing will happen for you.
Oh, that is huge. I love that, Joey. Just kind of from your perspective on being a major league agent, man. What would you say? What advice would you give to parents of young athletes or those young athletes, man, that are hoping to play at the D1 level or the professional level?
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Tony said, it's very important to find the right fit. You know, it may not be Tennessee, you may not be at that level yet, but keep developing, keep getting better, have some grit, be a team player. I mean, that's one thing that I know Tony is huge on. He has that culture in the clubhouse. Those guys will go to war with each other, and he'll go to war with them. I mean, you can see the passion and the tenacity that he has for his program, but that trickles down to all the coaches. I mean, that whole staff, just they love each other. I mean, the players and the coaches love each other, and you know, that's why players come back and they're having dinner at Tony's house with him, and it just goes to show that those type of guys, there's a place for them at the Division I level, that they can still develop, they can still get better, and still make their way into pro ball. And not everyone's going to be a first rounder, but baseball is about helping your team win, and whatever you can do to do that, that's huge, man. So I think parents need to focus more on that and teaching their kids to be team players, understand what it is to help a team win, even if you're 0 for 3. Still have a good mindset. Maybe you're going to make a play that's going to win the game. Maybe you're going to bunt a guy over. You're going to do the little things. And coaches look at that. They're not just looking for the guy that's going to hit the 3-run homer every time, because it's not going to happen in baseball. And we all know that, so.
I wasn't the one
Sorry,
that
go ahead.
cooked. I wasn't the one that cooked last night, by the way, for the record. But I hate to jump in and interrupt, but just you mentioned like not everyone's a match for Tennessee. It would be such a better recruiting world we all lived in. And then even the draft decisions that kids make and families make, it's all about match. Some kids are perfectly suited to jump into pro ball. Some kids do not need to do that.
Right.
Scouts are good about sharing that info with us. And then certain kids just aren't ready for this or that, or even though they're the best player in the country, maybe it's a specific program. But regardless of where you start, everything's so short term now with Spotify. I can listen to any song I want instantly, or just everything is so quick with gratification. Wherever you do feel it is a match, invest in that place. And I think kids immediately are looking to their left or right, like, what else could I do? Because this is not perfect. There is no perfect place, but there might be a place that's perfect for you. And if you originally thought it was a good match, then turn it into your perfect place. Dustin Bro's a kid I coached, and every day, not the greatest player, but maybe the greatest teammate. Every day he made you feel like, when I coached at the University of Missouri, like that was the greatest place in the world. And I'll tease, you could go outside and it's cold everywhere right now, but it's 35 degrees at Missouri up on that hill and you're practicing. Dustin Bro would make you feel like it was 100 degrees or 90, whatever perfect temperature it is, and you're on the best campus in the entire United States. So I think kids and families are quick to, again, look to other avenues. If it's not perfect, it's never going to be perfect. But if you invest in where you're at and what you're doing, it'll work out for you. And hey, there's coaching changes, and I think there is some justification to the portal and bouncing around. But overall, I think the more you invest in a place, the more you're going to get out. Same as you would do with money or whatever else.
That's awesome. That's awesome. The culture piece is huge, Joey. You had mentioned it, kind of in your answer, man. Culture isn't something that I learned a lot about until I got to pro ball, and winning wasn't necessarily at the forefront. It was more about development, and that's kind of where I started to learn how to win, which is crazy. Tony, on that culture that you've built, man, you've built a culture that these players, they want to be a part of. Everybody wants to be a part of it, man. What's the most important element in creating like a winning and sustainable team culture, in your opinion?
Yeah, our strength coach Q, he comes to mind. The kids spend so much time in the weight room, and now that summer prior to freshman year has become so valuable. But really, I think it's having an entire group of people that are, I use the word invest. I hate to go on a tangent, but it's got to be a two-way street. And I think we've got a big group of people that are willing to heavily invest in our guys as players and as people, and our nutritionist and our academic coordinator. Of course, I'm biased. I'm wearing this shirt. I think they're the best I've ever been around. And Q, everybody knows who he is, and everyone's trying to pull him into MLB, or I shouldn't say steal him away, but sway him to come to their college program. We've dealt with that every year for a reason. But Coach Elander, our third base coach, he's finally starting to get the recognition he deserves. You want to talk about somebody you see on the road, and is kind of a silent assassin. That's while the games are going on. But behind the scenes, I've literally told him he needs to spend less time talking to kids because he's a family man too, and he's a hell of a coach. But he invests so much into those kids. By the time they get on campus, there's a really strong relationship with a lot of people, but in particular with him. So relationships matter, whether it's just a social setting, a business setting, and certainly in athletics. And in our sport, I know it now better than anybody. That very easily could have been somebody else that won last year. One run, one slide, one break, one call. One different thing happens over the course of the regular season. So to me, if it's so small of a margin between winning and losing, it might be those relationships that kind of get you over the hump. And at the very least, it makes it more fun to come to work every day, which I think you're hitting on. I don't know that how many games we'll win in the SEC, but we'll have a lot of fun. And we'll vie for the gold medal or at least silver or bronze for having the most fun in the SEC, I'd like to think.
Big time. Big time. Yeah, it seems like you guys have a lot of fun. In my opinion, it's a lot more fun when you win than when you lose, man. I've done a lot of losing in my
Yeah,
career. You
that's
know what I
true.
mean? It's fun to see the energy in the dugout, man. It's fun to see the energy in the interviews that you give, man. It's awesome. I love it. You've been around a lot of great baseball players, man. Have averaged over 6 players drafted since you took over. Man, so you've been around a ton of studs. You had mentioned Max Scherzer earlier in this episode, man. So you've coached legends like that. You've been around those guys, Kinsler, Andrew Benintendi. Those guys are superstars. What separates players like that from the rest, and how do you spot those traits? Whether you're recruiting, whether you're coaching, man, run me through that.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I had the good fortune of going back home to St. Louis and being at an event where Ozzie Smith, Vince Coleman, Danny Cox. If you're a young kid and you don't know that guy, watch him or John Tudor on some sort of YouTube highlights. The Cardinals were kind of the team of the decade in the '80s in the NL. The Mets were their big rival, so they could argue they were that as well. But and all those guys that were at that event that were Cardinals that I got to meet, they all are better people than they are players, including Ozzie Smith, which is really hard to do. Arguably the best shortstop of all time. Yankee fans don't slash my tires or anybody else, but that character piece is huge. And it's a sport where there's a ton of reps, there's a lot of downtime, there's a bunch of games, and it's a sport where I don't mean to disrespect any other sport, but if you can shoot, you can shoot. If you're 300 pounds and you can move your feet well, your body's got to hold up, and you got to work and things like that. But you're kind of set in this spot where you're good. In baseball, the game is consistently evolving, and the best players get a little better and can adjust. It's a little different. So you want to be at your best when you're 30, not when you're 14. If you're a guy like Ian Kinsler or Max. So in order to do that and fill all those gaps that I was rambling on about, is you got to have some personality and some character to you as well. And in our sport too, you cannot get anywhere by yourself. You need a support system, no matter how talented you are. And the better the support system, or the support system will work better for you, the better person you are. So I really feel like, and everyone can think of an exception, like, hey, I played with this guy and he was a jerk, he was a superstar. Well, those are kind of the 1%ers that are just freak athletes. But if you're talking about the core guys that I've been around, they're every bit as good of a person and compete with some character as they are a talent. And I think that helps push them through a lot of different settings.
Ooh, I love that. That's
That's
big
awesome.
time. Joey, is there anything you want to jump in there and add, man? I got a question for you next.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about David Eckstein now that we're on the Cardinals a little bit. So David Eckstein, I knew one of his assistant coaches. I can't remember the name right now, and he was a walk on at Florida, and he goes out for the tryout. Doesn't They're like, this kid can't throw, he can't hit. The only thing he does is he's fast, right? He can run, and he can barely throw the ball across the diamond, and so they bring him on as like an equipment manager, and the first day is like in full uniform before anyone's there. Just runs up there, and he's every day taking ground balls and doing other things. He's not even on the roster at that point. And one of the coaches said, "Man, we just give him a shot, just give him a uniform." And I think the story goes the second baseman got injured halfway through the year or something like that. And he took over and he just took off, right? So years later, he's a World Series MVP. He's with the Cardinals. He's playing in the big leagues, and that just goes to show you like his mindset. Like he was just happy to have that opportunity to put on that uniform, and he just worked for everything. And he brought this energy to that clubhouse. And you probably could ask every major league organization back then if he would be a big leaguer even, and they would all said no. And it just goes to show what Tony's saying is just buying into the program, appreciating every day, saying that you get to instead of you have to. It is a big thing, man. Those guys, that's why they're different. That mentality is different. David Eckstein thought he was 6'4" in his mind, and he just ran with it.
Yeah,
Crazy. Rest is
you
history.
meant yeah, pretty awesome. You mentioned another guy. If you meet him or anyone he's related to, because his family's a baseball family, they all treat you like you're a superstar, no matter who you are.
That's
So
awesome.
he fits into that character category too. But yeah, you said can't. Everyone was saying can't behind his back, but the one person that wasn't saying can't was him. And the other thing too, being from St. Louis, David Freese was a World Series MVP too. Two
Absolutely. Yep.
guys that maybe aren't Jeter or Ozzie Smith, but they were able to achieve that because of their outstanding performance in the World Series, but also, you know, whatever high tide lifts all boats or whatever the heck the dang phrase is. I can't think of it on the spot, but they were a part of a really good team. So that team made them a better player than maybe they even originally were. And vice versa. They made the team better too, obviously.
Absolutely.
That's it's huge. The character piece of it, man. The stuff that you can't really measure is huge. We just saw three studs be inducted into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame the other night. CC Sabathia, um, obviously, absolutely incredible, man. Ichiro Suzuki, stud. Billy Wagner, stud. Ichiro, undersized, underrated in my opinion, man. Of course, now he's enshrined Hall of Fame history, man. But 27 years old when he debuted. Billy Wagner played for a D3 school, right? So just
Yep.
having a belief in yourself, man, fires me up. That's the point I was trying to make where I was going right there, man. So we're talked a little bit kind of about the future. Tony, you had mentioned college baseball evolving. So Joey, just from where you're sitting right now, being a baseball agent, where do you see the future of college baseball evolving over the next 10 years with kind of everything that's happening right now, man? And how can young players start to prepare for what's coming, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that players are now going to look more in development. What programs are developing players? Where can they go? And also the environment that those players are in. They hear things, right? They hear things about the clubhouses at different colleges and what's going on. And ultimately, that's why players enter the portal sometimes, right? They're like they want to explore and they want to go somewhere where maybe that level of energy is much higher, right? Where they can succeed and they can compete. Some guys they want to compete against the best, and they want to be in those environments, and they're okay with being the guy that comes off the bench and pinch hits if that's the case. But they want to be a part of something special, and I think that the dynamic is changing. I think players are going to go now where they feel is more of a fit, and that they have that relationship with the coaches, and where they're going to develop. And the writing's on the wall. The places that develop players. And if that's what you need as a player, you need to find those places. You need to have those conversations. Reach out to coaches. Go to their camps if you're interested in going to that program. Not don't be afraid to reach out and see. I mean, um, it's going to definitely change, and who knows, the draft might get shorter. So again, that player development piece is going to be huge. They're even saying that they might do the draft at an earlier year of college, maybe like after sophomore year, after freshman year. There's been some talks of that, just because some of these programs are doing such a phenomenal job of developing guys, right? Major league organizations may not be able to do it the same. The structure is different. The strength and conditioning schedule is different. They're able to balance school and get better. So the major league teams are happy about that. And they're happy to take a guy out of Tennessee after 3 years when he's ready to go and go to the big leagues quick. So
Yeah,
college is
100%.
taking a front seat, man.
Makes sense. Tony, man, what do you think? What does the next 10 years look like for college baseball and kind of how it's evolving?
Yeah, backtracking, I'd like the writer that didn't vote for Ichiro to please stand up, so we know who you are.
That's what I'm saying,
but
man.
uh, but
Right.
also, I think CC needs to start a stand-up comedian career, and then Billy, who you mentioned, how do you go from a D3 school? You want to talk about character? He coaches one of our commits, or now signee, and unbelievable dude, especially for what he's accomplished in his career. How humble he is. So that was pretty cool to see those three names. I think, though, college baseball right now, it's hard to argue that it's not at its peak with media coverage, fan base, the way Omaha has turned into an absolute party. The regionals and super regionals have now taken March Madness and implanted it in the summer. And I'm not so sure it won't one day be even better if it's not now. The star power is a big thing that sticks out. And a lot of that is because development has taken off like crazy. And then a media cover. It's a lot of things. These kids training in indoor facilities, but the star power in our sport is tremendous. So now that's external. If you look behind the scenes right now, it's one of the more tumultuous times in college baseball because there's so many different things going on and there's so many unknowns. So I just hope those, to go back to the ocean or the seas, I hope those rocky seas don't spill over into what the product is that the fans see on the surface or, again, the externalities. If those things can get settled, and I don't know, maybe the sport's so dang good that some of those things are just always going to exist. There's never going to be a perfect work environment. Um, but I think the next 5 years are going to be a lot bumpier than the 5 years after that. Um,
Mm,
I have confidence in our leaders, and it is a game where adjustments and evolving are so important. I think behind the scenes, it'll take some time, but some of these things like the portal, NIL, do we want to have one base at first base or two bases? Even little things like that, I think will get smoothed out a little bit as we grind out the next few years. And I think the external on the outside, the product that the fan sees, if they take their, the dad that takes his son to Omaha, I think that's only going to get better and more fun because right now it's exploded onto the sports scene and is continuing to rise. I feel like.
yeah, it's a ton of fun to watch. Obviously, you guys compete as the postseason happens, man. It's a lot of fun to see where the game of baseball has come. Kind of from where when I grew up, when I would be watching the College World Series to where it's at now, man. It's fantastic to see the progression. How viewership is kind of starting to skew younger. More kids are getting more interested in this stuff earlier. I think that's awesome, man. I hope everything you're saying works out exactly the way that you're talking about. Just, I'm grateful again, gentlemen, for the time. Wrapping up here, just some early career grind and reflections for you, Tony, man. So people see the success that you've had. It's freaking crazy, man. 725 winning percentage at your time in Tennessee. People might see that and think, man, you got it easy, right? But they don't. They may not see that you spent 15 years as an assistant coach grinding right before becoming a head coach. Man, if you could look back right now and give 25-year-old Tony Vitello any one piece of advice, man, what would it be and why?
Yeah, it would be get a little more balance in your life. I dang near lost my marbles there after the first 5 or 6 years of doing this. First of all, I got, again, at the ABC, I mentioned something, and I hope it didn't come off the wrong way, but I was, kids want to get into coaching, so they'll ask me stuff. I said, well, first of all, don't look at my path as an example because it was very extraordinary that Coach Jameson gave me an opportunity at such a young age at a Power Five school. And I've only recruited at places that, to be honest with you, are easy to recruit to, are all great places. So that's kind of my personal story. But more on your answer, I think the grind was part of it. As a player helped me as a coach. And Coach Elander, I coached him at TCU in the way he did his business and studied the game and got in the cage. And of course, he was a catcher. He was preparing to coach before he even started coaching. So I think the origin dates back a little further, but going into it, I do think I would have benefited from some more balance. but I was jumping into something like a lawyer would or a doctor would. And you have to put in some years of not getting paid what you deserve, not getting credit, not getting respect from other people, looking foolish at times, experimenting and trying something that you look back on. I was like, well, that was dumb, but at least you tried it. And there's this evolving. And then if you'll stick with it, if it is meant for you and you get kind of to the other side, the rewards will start to come. You know, I feel spoiled now. I feel like there's more rewards I'm getting than maybe I deserve or that I'm working for currently. But it's like Albert Pujols' contract or somebody else's. He's not getting paid for what he's going to do today. He's kind of getting paid for what he did in the past, especially those 10-year deals these guys sign. Hopefully that makes sense. So it's the same as being a player. You got to grind. And I wasn't a good player, and I really didn't come from a coaching tree. No one helped me do anything in particular. I feel like I had to hustle for it, and I hope that doesn't come off brash or cocky. But the one thing I don't ever want anyone thinking is that me or anyone on our staff has taken shortcuts, because it's a bunch of guys that kind of created their own future. Frank started out on laundry at Howard Junior College. And I've spoken with Coach E about Coach E, and there's some other examples too. But if you hustle, you get rewarded. And I think that's more the case in coaching and working in the game than it is playing the game. So hopefully that helps.
That's huge. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
if you
awesome.
hustle,
I
you
wanted
get
to add
rewarded.
something too, Ian, on Tony. I remember one of his interviews after the national championship. He said there was a lot of hotel rooms that he stayed late, by himself. A lot of those nights, different things, challenges that he had, and that really resonated with me because that was the same thing in 2017. I didn't have any draft picks. Right, I was just starting out. I'm interning, recruiting guys to try to see if they're going to get drafted or not, and that really resonated with me because I felt the same way. Right, starting out, you got to grind. I remember taking a flight one time to Oregon on a whim, and I saw this kid, Aaron Zavala. He ended up becoming I think a third or second round pick with the Rangers. And the kid, I sit down with him and his parents, and they're like, "You think he can get drafted?" I'm like, "Yes, absolutely." He was a walk on at Oregon, and he just ended up developing. I think he got taken in the second round. He wasn't one of my guys, but I did something crazy like that and went out there, and all those experiences I think mold you, and since then I have 40 players drafted or signed, and that hard work, I have a lot of respect for Tony because of that. I can relate to him on those things, and he deserves everything he has right now. So
Thank you. It's I appreciate that. It's hard to say as a dude or a competitor, but it can get lonely if you're out there as a recruiting guy, or you're working as an advisor or an agent, and even as a scout. So going back to 25 too, if I was 25, I'd punch myself in the face a little bit and say, quit trying to do everything on your own. As competitive as we are on the field, heck, I'll just say it. One of the biggest shouting matches I've ever gotten into in my life was on a field with competition, and that was my fault. It should have been handled outside of the field. It was with someone who helped me maybe more than anybody other than my dad in the game, and Coach Van Horn. So I'm just trying to illustrate the fact that, yeah, you can do both things. You can compete like crazy between the lines, but away from things like at the ABCA, you see all these people that might be vying for players or wins helping each other. And so it's lonely enough. So don't make it more so by making it a solo project. Lean on people, because people really enjoy helping each other, especially in our game.
Mm.
absolutely.
Big time. Again, I'm so grateful for you guys' time. We're here with Tony Vitello and Joey Guzman. Last question I got for you guys, Tony. I gotta ask it to you before we get out of here, man. So, man, to be good in this game, when we're talking about the hitting perspective of things, if you fail 7 times out of 10, man, you can play this game for a long time. There's a ton of failure, especially when you eventually get to the top, right? We're talking about the national championship. In order to get there, there had to be some sort of failure, some sort of adversity you guys have to overcome behind the scenes, whether it's on the field, off the field, man. What is your approach to failure? How do you view it, both for you, for your players, man, and how do you use that to build resilience?
yeah, you better recognize it's coming, first thing. And then secondly, you better be willing to attack it or adjust whatever phrase you feel appropriate or verb you want to tie to it. And then you could even go a third step, and you might as well start welcoming it, and knowing that in the long run, it'll help you get better. Again, I think some of the problems today with either recruiting, development, failure, like you mentioned, everyone's short term, short sighted. What's on Twitter now? What's the quick snapshot as opposed to what's the runway look like? You got a pretty long runway in this game if you're a 13-year-old kid. So, where do you see yourself? Where does that person see themselves in 10 years? Like we talked about the game. And I think a big part of that is some kids are gifted with that some of the players you mentioned I've coached that have that brain that's wired the right way. But when you're in that uniform, you might have to rewire your brain a little bit and convince yourself that there is a positive that can come out of every negative, or that adversity, will only make you better in the long run. Very, very challenging to do, easier said than done in a chair. But now I've kind of racked up some years doing this, and most of the guys that are fun to be around, their brain is a little off. And, that quirkiness or that uniqueness makes them capable of handling the adversity that gets thrown their way, because there are so many repetitions and so many of them don't come with the outcome that you want. So you better find a way to spin it to where you really enjoy playing the game and you look forward to overcoming those challenges as opposed to those challenges squashing you.
Ooh. Ooh, failure and adversity. You got to welcome it.
Absolutely.
Joey, is there anything, man, you want to add to that before we get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, welcome failure for sure. I would say for me and for my players, I tell them, you don't fail, you learn. From every failure, there should be something you take out of it that you learn from and you get better. Sometimes I don't get the player that I wanted to get. I got to do something better next time, right? I got to keep learning. I got to keep grinding. Um, so yeah, just accept it, right? Especially in baseball. I mean, you're going to fail, right? But how are you going to come back from that? How are you going to make adjustments? And like Tony said, some of those guys are off. I heard a story of Mike Trout. I had a mutual friend that played in the minor leagues with him, and he was 0 for 3, 3 Ks in a game in the minors, and he hits a bomb his last at bat. So the manager comes up to him and says, "Hey man, you got to stop striking out so much." And Mike Trout's like, "But did you see how far I hit that ball?" So it goes to show that those guys, like you said, they're a little different. Like, okay, I failed, big deal. I still got a fourth at bat. I'm going to do something here. So yeah, just learn from it and have a positive mindset, because there's no way to avoid failure, especially in baseball.
Awesome. 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 Well, there you guys have it. Becoming a champion doesn't happen accidentally. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a conscious choice that you make that's reinforced by intentions and brought to life by your actions. I appreciate you guys being here. Tony, man, thank you for the time. Thank you for talking about your story, your team, man. Fires me up to have somebody of your caliber here on the show. Thank you. Joey, man, appreciate you being a friend of the show. Always appreciate you coming on here, blessing the audience with your insight, your story. Thank you guys, man. It means a lot. Big
You
time.
bet. My pleasure.
Yes, sir. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of the Nine Hole Podcast. We'll see you all back here bright and early tomorrow with the new Baltimore Orioles slugger, Tyler O'Neill. Keep grinding, everybody.